One thing I've found interesting is how often attention difficulties seem to come up in conversations about dyslexia. Now, I'm not saying every dyslexic person has attention issues, and I'm certainly not saying they're the same thing. But for me, I've definitely noticed a connection. People sometimes assume that if a dyslexic person loses concentration, gets distracted, or switches off, it's because they're not interested. In my experience, that's often not what's happening at all. Sometimes my brain simply struggles to engage with information when it's being presented in a way that doesn't make sense to me. It's almost like my brain refuses to connect with it. But if the explanation doesn't click, my attention can disappear surprisingly quickly. Then something changes. Someone explains the exact same thing in a different way. Suddenly, my brain locks onto it instantly. Now I'm fully engaged. The information didn't change. The way it was presented changed. That's something I've noticed throughout my life. Some people think attention difficulties mean you can't focus. For me, the problem isn't focusing. The problem is directing that focus. When something captures my interest, I can focus on it for far longer than most people I know. The challenge is when something feels disconnected, repetitive, or doesn't make sense in the way it's being explained. That's when my attention starts wandering. I think a lot of dyslexic people experience something similar, not because they're lazy, not because they're not intelligent, but because their brains are constantly looking for patterns, logic, and connections. If those connections aren't there, it's much harder to stay engaged. This can sometimes cause problems at school, at work, or even in conversations. Someone might explain something, and halfway through, your brain has already started thinking about three other things connected to what they just said. By the time they finish talking, you've followed an entire chain of ideas in your head and missed the second half of the conversation. I've done that more times than I'd like to admit. Someone will be talking to me, and one thing they say sparks an idea. That idea sparks another, then another, then another. Before I know it, I've mentally travelled 5 miles away from the original conversation. Meanwhile, they're still talking, and I'm suddenly trying to work out how much I've missed. The frustrating thing is that it doesn't happen because you don't care. Quite often it happens because you're thinking too much rather than not enough. Your brain is busy exploring connections, possibilities, and ideas. Sometimes it's a fantastic strength, sometimes it's incredibly annoying. You stop expecting yourself to think like everybody else. You start working with your strengths instead. For me, that's made a huge difference. What once felt like constant frustration now feels more like understanding the operating manual that should have come with my brain years ago. And while it doesn't solve everything, it certainly makes the journey a lot easier.